Hello and welcome to Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is February 8th, 2024, and we are staring at charts yet again, taking a look at Bitcoin on the daily here. We can see that Bitcoin closed yesterday's candle above the upper second standard deviation, thus kicking off Bollinger Band expansion to the upside. And we do see that reflected in the BBWP read at a 61 over 47. Bitcoin also broke out of the smaller range here, which was the previous range prior to the deviation high and the deviation low on wicks and closes. And the smaller range was capping out at about $45,000. So Bitcoin has broken that area. If we are to see this continue to the upside, the next big area to watch for would be this $46,000 wick high, which is coming in generally right around the closes, the close open here at the highs, just prior to putting in that $49,000 wick high. The next big area above $46,000 would be the close open high itself at around $47,000, which is a monthly closing structure as well in the longer term time frames. And above there, the wick high at around $49,000 to $50,000. We'll discuss further upside targets in just a moment, but I did want to kind of give you the idea of what I'm looking for next, and that would be if Bitcoin can maintain daily closes above the upper first, and specifically I am talking about daily closes here, then it would maintain expansive posture. And the upper first standard deviation is currently coming in at $44,000. So that's going to be kind of my short-term pivot on the daily to be looking out for. If we do see closes below there, well, I would generally be targeting somewhere around the mid to low $43,000 level around the highs here of this previous consolidation to the basis band, which is coming in around 42.4 to 5. Below there, and I would be targeting the low side of this consolidation around 41.8, which is a weekly level, to around 42K. If that area were to be lost, I would target right back to the lower first standard deviation, which is coming in around the low side of the tighter consolidation range prior to the deviation up and down, and that is coming in at 40,800. So I would give it some room around 40,800 to 41K or so. I wouldn't necessarily be looking for too much more than that, at least on the daily time frame between now and tomorrow's live stream, that's for sure, unless something crazy were to happen. But if something crazy did happen, I would be looking down to the lower second standard deviation, which is coming in around 39,200 to 500 at this close. Below there, of course, there is that monthly area where the wick low came in at 38,500. Of course, this is a nice upside move, and as it stands right now, in general, I would be targeting somewhere around the deviation highs as long as Bitcoin can push through $46,000 and maintain closes above 44 at the upper first. So I did want to look at that. The next big part I wanted to talk about here was BBWP. And the panel down here, you can see that BBWP is over the moving average, and that is a 61 over 47. But Bitcoin needs to get today's close, and probably today being the Friday candle, and probably Saturday's closure, to actually turn the moving average up with it. As it stands right now, this is a bit of a counter signal. So BBWP is measuring the price volatility within the bands here, and the bands are getting upside expansion. If we go back and we take a look here, you can see that the upper bands are expanding up while the lower first is flattening, and we are getting slight expansion to the downside of the lower bands as Bitcoin pulls away from the basis here. So the second standard deviation is not quite as angled down because Bitcoin, of course, is trading above the basis. Basis is turning up. So we are getting a more aggressive look to the upside. So this is good for bulls as long as Bitcoin's closing above that upper first. But the next piece of the puzzle would be turning the moving average up on BBWP to maintain price volatility within the current breakout structure of the bands. So within the current upside expansion, basically, you want to see BBWP support that upside expansion with the moving average turning up meaning that price is confirmed to be moving, or volatility is being confirmed to be moving up as well in this case. So same goes for downside, moves like what we saw back here when price was, moving back to the upper first, but then it went into a consolidation. Even though it started to get above the moving average there, the moving average did not get quite a positive slope. It got a little bit of a positive slope, but then dropped right off into consolidation. So we do want to see this get a positive slope. That would be a good thing for the bulls. And on the other side of it, the bears would want to see a failure here. Moving average stay to the downside and then volatility cool down, which means that price would be heading back towards the basis. That would really, the big criteria for that would be closing below the upper first standard deviation. We can also see that the daily momentum pivot is here at 44,750 to 800. This will fluctuate throughout the day, so I would keep an eye on that. Bitcoin is, trading above $45,000, so it does have some room before it would endanger that pivot. But even if the pivot turned to the downside, it's all within the context of this being in a bullish structure on a fresh local breakout within and a range break that's pretty much targeting the highs there. Could it fail? Absolutely it could, but there are a few other things to keep in mind here. We have a 2-day closing today, and if Bitcoin can close above the upper first standard deviation on the 2-day chart, well, the big range would be basically downside range is if Bitcoin were to break down below the upper first on the 2-day chart. That makes available the basis band again, somewhere around $43,000, which is coming right in the middle of that consolidation prior to this move up. And if it does close above the upper first, well, then we would in general be targeting support and resistance structures to the left here. So that $46,000 wick high, as it is trading above the close opens here at $45,000. But the next big area would be the upper second, around $46,900 to $47,000. So basically the closing highs of the deviation up there. And then above there, the wick high at $49,000 to $50,000 or so. And on the other side of that, if Bitcoin were to trade back down on the daily in between 2-day closures, lose the 2-day upper first, it makes available all of those downside targets we talked about to the basis. If it subsequently dropped that $43,000 basis on the 2-day and then drop the wick low of this higher low on a swing, then we'd be targeting right back to the lower first here and the lower $41,000 range at $41,200. Below there, of course, right back to lows at $39,500 on a close, to the wick low there at $38,500 at the monthly. That is closing today. We just got a 3-day closure, and this one's a good one. Bitcoin closed right up against the upper second standard deviation. Now, it did not close above. Now, if it closed above, it would have kicked off a little bit more aggressive expansion to the upside, but in this case, it closed right on it, and it did get expansion to the upside because Bitcoin closed above the upper first, and it's basically pushing the upper second standard deviation. So as long as it remains above the upper first at around 44,350 to 360, then, generally we'd be looking to the upper second and above. And in this case, that is coming in at 45,800, of course, to the 3-day closing structure up here around 46,100, of course, above there. On any price action, and especially on closures, we'd be looking for the highs to get tagged if they didn't already, somewhere around the wick at 47,900 to 48K, to the wick high at $49,000 to $50,000. Of course, if Bitcoin did break down from that upper first at 44,350 to 360, then in general we'd be looking back to where the basis, which is coming in at around $43,000, just like the 2-day chart. Below there, we're looking to the wick low structure around that weekly at 41,850 or so, to the lower first there at 41.5, drops that. We're looking down to around $40,000, which is where the 3-day closing deviation low is. This did actually close below the wick lows of the range. It did not close below the open, which was kind of defining this range prior to the deviation high, though. So, there is an argument made that could be made that it's just a deviation on a wick for the 3-day chart, or in the context of the 3-day chart, which is fine. The 3-day momentum is pivoted at 41, 443. So lots of fours there, and my brain just kind of blended them all together. Let's take a look at BBWP. It is expanding, of course. You can see that we're getting upside expansion, of course, on the bands, and it is supported by both the BBWP and the moving average, pointing to the upside here. Now closes above the upper second standard deviation at around that 45,800 on the 3-day to 46K. Would see this get a much more aggressive angle, and of course if it closed above there, it would pull that moving average quite a bit more vertical. Now let's go back to the 2-day real quick, and you can see that we're getting the same kind of signal on the 2-day as the daily, and this differs very much from what we are seeing on the 3-day and what I'm going to show you next, which is the 4-day and 5-day, because they also close tomorrow with the next 2-day candle. Now, in this case, we can see that Bitcoin is trying to get that BBWP metric or oscillator above the moving average. I would still want to see it close above the moving average and then get subsequent closures above there to turn the moving average up to really confirm sustainability. As it stands, the bands are in more of a range posture, but Bitcoin can still, if it gets above the upper first, likely to be above the moving average for BBWP, targeting that upper second area, which would then subsequently, if it can maintain closures above the upper first, start grinding that upper second to the highs, possibly higher if Bitcoin can close above it. Now, that 2-day momentum pivot I didn't talk about yet, so we are kind of jumping around here. My apologies. Maybe I did. 41,300 is going to be the 2-day pivot. Of course, the 3-day pivot is there at 41,443. So basically 41,450 to 41,500 or so. We are seeing the etchings of a larger move in the works here for the 4-day, and this is where things, I think, even if Bitcoin gets around the local highs, unless it really blasts off through the wick high there at around 49 to 50K and starts taking off into the mid to low 50s, we could see some shorter term pullbacks on the daily and two-day time frame, unless it just goes for it and really turns its BBWP and oscillators up and the moving averages up for that oscillator. That volatility metric, I should say. It's not really an oscillator. It's more of a metric. But in this case, the big thing to come next is going to be, looking at the 4-day and 5-day charts as they lead into the weekly. And these are going to close tomorrow. We're looking at the 4-day chart here. Bitcoin came all the way down to the lower first, reclaimed the basis, sat on the basis on the close opens and wicks here. That basis is at 42,673, and it is currently trading above the upper first, which we have in this case a very clear, range that Bitcoin is potentially breaking out of towards the deviation high. And in this case, we are seeing compression of the Bollinger Bands. On this next close, I would expect the upper first, upper second, depending on where Bitcoin closes today's candle, to either start to flatten or start to head back to the high here, as the upper second is right around 46,550. The high is at $47,000 to the wick high at around 49. So if we do see a close above the upper first, we're going to see continued volatility expansion, like what we're seeing on the 3-day. And this could very easily turn from a compressive look like this to an expansive look, especially if Bitcoin can get above that upper second. I kind of, based on the look of price right now, before close, I'm a little bit more biased towards it kind of hanging around that high there if it gets there, rather than impulsing through it. But we could, if it does get up there, I should say, I'm trying to pick my words carefully here. If it does get up there, I would be expecting something significant to happen within the next 4 and 5 day closures. And if it didn't happen within the next 4 and 5 day closures, I'd be looking for it to subsequently happen very shortly thereafter. So basically, the next close or two on these time frames, um, and that would be after observing what today's close will look like. So it is painting the same picture. I do think that there's probably going to be some significant resistance should Bitcoin start pushing up, especially above 46 towards the monthly at $47,000. But the big thing here is also going to be this. We see expansion is confirming right now as Bitcoin has pulled away from the basis band. If it closes above the upper first, this is going to be the next closure to confirm expansion of volatility, or BBWP, price volatility within the Bollinger Bands. And I would expect the bands to then follow suit. This being directional because it is above the basis band at this point. And if it does close above the upper first, still maintaining that upward direction towards the top side of the bands. The next big significant thing to look out for would be any close above 42,869, nice, would get at minimum, an initial cross up. And I do suspect if Bitcoin were to close where it is now or higher, we'll not just see the K read cross up, but also also the D read. So both a K and a D read cross to the upside. When looking at the 5 day, we'll just stay right here on this chart. We are not far from the actual momentum pivot for the 5 day, which is at 45,580. So Bitcoin is currently trading at, a little bit on the mid to low $45,000 region. If it starts to get mid to high $45,000 region, then that is in play for today. And this is the other reason why I say the 4 day is going to be something to watch, not necessarily, as significant in today's closure. You do want to see if you're bullish, close above the upper first. But the 5 day isn't, in my opinion, done baking. So the next 4 day period or the one after it, so after today's closure, so the next 4 day period after today's closure or the one after that is where I would start to really look for things to start developing in terms of expansive posture, especially if Bitcoin can maintain closures above the upper first standard deviation on the 4 day. That would then lead to the 5 day, which then could lead to BBWP expansion above the moving average here. And I'm going to show you why that's important. We see that we are getting, we've come into the compressive phase on the 5 day. Bitcoin came back to the basis, which is typical. Get a little bit of fuel back at the basis, especially on these longer term time frames, and then pop right back up. If it closes above the upper first today with that 4 day and 2 day, likely going to see BBWP move up a little bit more. Moving average is probably going to come down to converge with it. So we do see downward slope on the moving average. BBWP doesn't have any kind of projection setting on it, but likely to take another tick to the upside there. And the closer they get to convergence, while Bitcoin is also pushing the upper second standard and upper third standard deviation to the upside, while the lower standard deviations still chase. It's very bullish. All right. And in general, above the upper first here at 44,350 on any close today, then as long as Bitcoin is trading above there, we're generally targeting the 5 day closing highs at the mid to upper $46,000 region to the upper second here, which is coming in at 47,600, and then the wick high, of course, at 49 to 50,000. If we see anything closing above on the 5 day and the next 5 day, above 47,600, or even today, who knows, then I would be looking for a significant expansion to test that high and higher. Of course, if Bitcoin did lose the upper first at around 44,350, I would be looking right back to the basis initially, somewhere around that $41,000 region, and below there, the closing area at around 40,000, to the wick low at 38.5. Possibly even pulling in this lower first. You can see the lower first is now lining up in a big support area right at these highs. at around 38,000, which is $500 below the monthly support that Bitcoin tagged right here directly back in late January. So this is what I'm going to be looking for in today's close. Of course, many of you may even watch this prior to the video on the same day. This is recorded the day before. It's still Thursday for me. But let's go check and see where what some potential is if Bitcoin were to start breaking out above this big monthly zone. So it is a big monthly zone. If Bitcoin does happen to reclaim the upper second and this monthly area at 45.5, I would in general be looking, of course, to $46,000 and then up here to the next monthly by the upper third on the daily at $47,000. Above there, probably some short-term resistance between the monthly here at 47, at minimum, some short-term resistance to that March 2022 monthly swing high. That was the bear market, the first bear market confirmed lower high, and that's at 48,240. So I'd be looking for significant resistance in that area. Bitcoin did run to it. Above there, especially on closes, wick highs fair game at $49,000 to $50,000. And if that area is closed above on a daily, and especially on higher time frames, if we can close higher time frames above there, then we're looking up to the next weekly at 50,800 to 51.8. And then above there, I would in general be targeting around that September of 2021 weekly. There is a weekly swing high basically up there at around 53. So in general, any closes above $49,000 to $50,000 on the daily, and I would be looking in the mid to low $50,000 region. So generally somewhere around 55, 56,000 to that low $50,000 range at 53, and even lower at 50,800 at the weeklies. Those are going to be big areas if Bitcoin can take out this deviation high. All right, that's going to do it for me today. You have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening. No matter where you are in the world, please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out.